Good morning, all, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar. My name is Elsa Gallagher. I'm the Habitat Program Director for the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund, the best little not-for-profit providing habitat programs for pollinators that you'll ever find. And I wanted to welcome you to this webinar today. 2 weeks ago in Chicago, we kicked off a program called Solar Synergy. It is innovative, it is exciting, and there are a lot of people asking questions about it. So Pete Berthelsen, our executive director, is going to talk to you a little bit about what's happening there with Solar Synergy, where we're moving forward, and how you can become involved. 2 ground rules I want to set for you. We are recording this. We will send video of the recording out later, so you get a chance to send it to somebody who didn't get a chance to watch it. But in the chat, if you would not mind putting your name and your location in the chat function at the bottom of your screen. All the questions are going to come to us through the Q&A function. So if you have a question during the webinar that Pete doesn't answer during his presentation, please put that in the question and answer, the Q&A button, and we will ask those questions, as many as we can get to, before the end of the program. We have this scheduled for a little less than an hour, so we're hoping we can get it wrapped up certainly before the top of the hour. So thank you for joining us today, and I will pass the baton over to Pete Berthelsen, our Executive Director.
Thank you, Elsa. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm gonna jump right into today's webinar and give you just a really short introduction of who I am for those of you that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting before. I'm coming to you today from central Nebraska, part of the world that's called the Loess Hills. It is an area that is divided almost evenly between row crop production and rangeland. This is a little aerial view of our farm and ranch. I am an amateur beekeeper, but I am primarily a wildlife biologist that has spent my career working on designing, establishing, and managing high quality habitat like we see right here. So I want to also start by giving just a really brief introduction of who the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund is, because I think there's probably listening to this webinar today that really have never heard of this nonprofit before. And just know that this is a nonprofit that works with private land, public land, and corporate land, which you should interpret as any land, to establish high quality, what we call next-gen conservation, pollinator habitat on those lands. And as we get ready to start, I also want to give you just a couple of foundational thoughts about how the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund thinks about habitat, and in this case, pollinator habitat. And that first thought is that we need to make every acre the best it can be. There's not enough acres of habitat on the landscape. So when we get an acre of it, it's really important that we make it the best that it can be. And again, that includes work on private land, public land, corporate land. In this example, making every acre the best it can be includes working with agriculture. And for the rest of this webinar, we're going to talk about how that can also be applied to renewable energy. The next foundational thought is that if we continue to try to solve kind of big, hairy, audacious problems like monarch butterfly population recovery and that sort of thing, doing things the same way that we've done them for the last decade, we're not going to be successful. The status quo won't get it done. And we'll talk about monarch butterflies in particular a little bit later in the presentation. And the solution that we bring to doing things different, not following the status quo, is this thing that we call next-gen habitat projects, and designing and thinking about our habitat just a little bit differently. And the last foundational thought is for you to think about is that not all pollinator habitat is created equal. Just because a plant is flowering doesn't mean that it has great pollinator value. So, and we'll chat about those things just a little bit more as well. So as Elsa mentioned, we have just very recently announced a new program that we're going to talk about on this webinar. It's called Solar Synergy. And solar synergy is really about working with solar developers collaboratively. And you're going to hear that term a bunch during this webinar about how we're working collaboratively with lots of others to design solar energy projects that produce a whole wide range of benefits. And as Elsa mentioned, 2 weeks ago, we attended the Solar Farm Summit conference. And at that conference, we were given the opportunity to kind of have a public launch of this program and a public announcement of it. And in a couple of short weeks, we now already have 24 projects that are in the process of enrolling in solar synergy. So we're very excited about that. And probably the other thing that I want to say right at the start is that while not limited to utility scale solar projects, solar synergy was really designed and built and being introduced to you today, thinking about utility scale solar projects and the unique challenges that those projects have, but then also the unique opportunities that those projects have to deliver significant pollinator and other environmental benefits. And we'll chat about those right now when I tell you that solar synergy was designed to deliver 4 key benefits. The seed mixtures that are planted on the site, carbon sequestration benefits, pollinator habitat and monitoring, and then aspects with the commercial beekeeper. We're going to talk about all 4 of those benefits right now, very specifically, so that you can start to understand the different things that solar synergy is bringing to a potential utility scale solar project. So the first thing that is unique in our approach with solar synergy is that we will collaboratively work with the developer, the EPC, the end user of the power, kind of whoever is in the mix in this project to design 2 different seed mixtures that will be established on the site. One for use within the array area, and one that we sometimes refer to as a buffer seed mixture that goes in the area either inside the project fence or outside the project fence, where we don't have restrictions on how tall the vegetation can grow. And that's a good lead in to what really makes, I think, utility scale solar projects so very, very unique and in some ways challenging. And that is the height of the lower panel above the ground. And that height determines many things that we can do on the project, particularly related to the vegetative cover seed mixture design. And it's my impression and observation that the industry standard for utility scale solar projects is really moving to a lower panel height that is 20 to 24 inches above the ground. That is very different than a lower panel height that's 36 inches or 48 inches above the ground when it comes to how you can design a seed mixture. That's part of the challenge that is out there and the unique opportunity. So when we work with a project that has, say, a 20-inch lower panel height above the ground, our task, our challenge is usually to design a seed mixture that does not grow taller than 18 inches. Okay, that probably makes sense. If it grew taller, it would produce shading on the panel, and even at a little bit, it might start reducing the amount of energy that is being produced on the site. That's not the only consideration. We also have about another 15 factors that go into designing that seed mixture. In this case, one will be the vegetative height. What's the pollinator value? Will the seed mixture be able to withstand some mowing activities? How quickly will it establish? How easy does it establish? Is it cost effective? Are the components of the mix commercially available? Does it produce soil health benefits? And on and on and on. All of those things are factored into a recipe that designs the seed mixtures, and we tend to plant the 2 different seed mixtures in an example like you see on the screen right here. Kind of the pinkish or the mauve color is the area of a project where the solar panels are, and we have those vegetative height restrictions. The green areas are the areas where we have a chunk of area without panels for whatever reason, where we don't have that vegetative height restriction. Might be inside the fence, like this area, or it might be even outside the fence, but inside the project boundary, like this area. That green area is where we tend to plant the more traditional pollinator seed mixture that we would design for use on a project. And when I say that we design a buffer area seed mixture, the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund has a couple considerations. One, a minimum of 40 wildflower species in that seed mixture, probably more like 65 or 70. Very highly diverse, significant pollinator value. And here's the first really cool part about solar synergy. The Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund is going to provide you with the buffer seed mixture, potentially for free. There's a sliding scale based on how many acres you're going to need, but you could get it for free or heavily discounted. And let me just go back one slide. And if we look at this, that buffer area typically is about 10 to 15% of the project size that's out there. So the buffer mix can be provided by the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund free of charge. The array area mix is going to be purchased just like it always was going to be for the project. So there's another requirement that comes with this program, and that is that there is a vegetation management plan that goes with the project, because we want to ensure the pollinator health and habitat benefits are going to be established on the site and then carry through that lifespan of the site. These different bullet points are the key points that we think needs to be included in a vegetation management plan. You can have that vegetation management plan produced wherever you want. Happy to work with you collaboratively on it, but these are the points that kind of need to be providing guidance to the project and included in a vegetation management plan. The second benefit of this program is related to carbon sequestration monitoring. We will be designing collaboratively the seed mixtures that are for use on this project that are known to be able to take CO2 from the atmosphere, bring it into the plant, and sequester it in the soil. Part of that is going to be soil monitoring, and that starts in what we call year 0, before the project has started, and then continuing with those soil samples in year 0, 2, 4, and 6 over a 6-year period to document those changes in carbon sequestration that are taking on the site. And when carbon sequestration gains happen, and we're very confident about that statement that there will be significant gains, if those carbon sequestration gains were able to be monetized into carbon credits, we have willing purchasers that we can bring to your project to actually purchase those carbon credits. The third benefit of solar synergy is that we will be performing monitoring on both the habitat and pollinator populations that are occurring on the site. And we will be doing that with our partners, our friends at the Monarch Joint Venture. They will actually be going onto the site and monitoring the pollinator habitat and the different pollinator species and abundance of those species that are on the site. This can be a really important issue for a project. So if we think about probably very recently, last week, people might have heard a little bit about monarch butterflies in the news. This is an estimate of the eastern monarch butterfly population, the overwintering population. It's an index. And one of the things that we know that it has been estimated that the population needs to be at this red line to be able to be healthy and sustainable. Okay. we're well below the red line. It's a very significant concern, and the monarch butterfly is being considered as being listed for the Endangered Species Act. If a solar developer is part of a collaboration called the Candidate Conservation Agreement with assurances for monarch butterflies that the energy and transportation lands industry has, and you're a member of that, our monitoring and solar synergy will check the box of everything that you need to do for this agreement. In addition, because we do such a robust form of monitoring, you would also qualify for a supplemental monitoring discount as your membership to the CCAA. It's kind of the whole Monarch CCAA thing is a complicated issue. Just know that utility scale solar projects have a unique opportunity to provide benefit to the monarch butterfly, along with all kinds of other species like the American bumblebee that is currently being considered for a CCAA of itself, or a species that's already listed as endangered, the rusty patch bumblebee. And if you are listening to this webinar today and you have projects going in these areas of yellow, that is the current kind of outline of where rusty patch bumblebees are known to occur. So we could easily design a project with you that has benefits for that species. Okay. One of the things that the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund is really excited about is we have 5 research studies that are currently looking at the value of these things that I've described as NextGen Habitat. And we're excited because these seed mixtures are documented to produce really significant pollinator benefits. So I want to show you some early results from one of the studies. This is a study that was conducted by the U.S. Geological Survey. And in that study where they compared Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund seed mixtures, our NextGen Habitat, just like we're going to put onto these solar projects, they compared it to the habitat provided by the Conservation Reserve Program, national wildlife refuges, state wildlife areas, roadsides, pastures, grasslands, basically everything that a pollinator species could go to. One of the things that we found is that we have about twice as many flowers as anything else available on the landscape, about 3 times the amount of honeybee use on our projects, and this is really exciting, about 8 times the amount of native bee use in our seed mixtures, our habitat, than anything else that was available on the landscape. So the data shows that this is next-gen habitat that makes a difference. 4th benefit is we want to connect these projects to commercial beekeeping. So some of you might be nodding your head right now, and some of you might be going, I don't get it. What's that about? Well, let me start by explaining to you that in the United States, when you look at honey production, so we're talking about commercial beekeepers here, that over really a fairly short period of time, what I think is a short period of time, we've had a 44% decline in the amount of honey that we produce as a nation. From 1987 to 2021, a 44% decline. Here's a trivia question for you. Think about it. What, out of all the honey that we consume as a nation in an average year, what percentage of that honey do you think is produced here in the United States? Think about it for a second. Well, the answer is 25%. I'm going to make an assumption that you are as surprised as I was when I heard that. 25%. So 75% of the honey that we consume as a nation is being imported from other parts of the world, some of which you might not really be very excited about it coming from. So we're very confident that by designing great habitat that works for all the objectives on a utility scale solar project and then connecting a commercial beekeeper to that project, that one, we can increase U.S. honey production, U.S. sourced honey production. And then if you're a solar developer on the call tonight, think about this. Think about your corporation's sustainability platform. And I want to show you something really cool that our friends at Connexus Energy have already figured out. Think about the messaging opportunities of taking honey from your utility scale solar project, bottling it up and giving it out when you're at a conference and have a booth, or you have a different sort of event that you're going and attending and working on through the permitting process of your next project or something like that. This is really cool. Connexus Energy figured it out. This is an opportunity to have kind of a really cool sustainability message. All right, coming around the corner here to the end of this presentation, and I want to give you a couple more thoughts. The first is the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund has been working on solar energy projects since 2019 to establish a final vegetative cover that works with the project and provides other great environmental benefits. We're excited to expand this now with solar synergy by strategically designing collaboratively the habitat that goes on to large utility scale solar projects like this one. So there is an agreement that is signed. I've talked a little bit about this, and we're happy to share this agreement with anybody that reaches out to us following this webinar. But one of the things in there is we got to have a vegetation management plan. We talked about that. The agreement talks about how the data that's collected on the site will be used. There's probably almost certainly questions in the Q&A right now that is, well, what projects can be enrolled? This is a national coverage area program. Anywhere in the country with this caveat. As long as we can be confident that we're going to be able to collaboratively produce a great pollinator health and habitat outcome, we're happy to work with you. Just to be clear, as you're thinking about this, talked a little bit about the seed. We're providing the buffer area seed mixture for free or at a discounted rate. The carbon sequestration monitoring, 6 years. The pollinator habitat and the pollinator population monitoring and the connection to commercial beekeeping are all brought to you at zero cost. No cost for participation in the Solar Synergy program. We're really excited about our opportunity to do that and bring that to you. Here's another thing. We don't have relationships with solar developers or installation companies, a contractual financial relationship. But we've been doing this long enough that if you're interested, we will happily provide you with a list of installation companies or places where you can get a vegetation management plan written that we highly recommend. Proven successful, because unfortunately, in our experience, the places that really know how to establish great pollinator habitat, that final vegetative cover on utility scale solar projects, they're hard to come by. So the ones that do a really good job, we would be happy to give you their recommendations and you can talk to them one-on-one. Okay, so 2 weeks ago from today, we publicly announced Solar Synergy, and we're very happy to say that we already have commitments for enrollment of projects with some key solar developers in the country. This was kind of introduced and announced just a little bit before the Solar Farm Summit. We kind of reached out to what we like to call the friends and family solar developers, the ones that we've been working with for a while, and they had just a very, very positive response and have been part of helping us craft how the Solar Synergy program is going to function. We're very excited about their involvement. So that's the presentation. We're going to turn it back over to our host, Elsa, right now to take on some more questions, feel free to hit and scan the QR code that's on your screen right now. That will take you to our website. On the website, you'll learn and hear a little bit more detail about the program. You're going to be able to send us the contact information. We don't have an application form because every one of these projects that we're going to take starts with a conversation. Reach out to us, contact us, we'll schedule a call, and we'll talk about your interest in your projects. That's the enrollment process, is that first conversation that happens. And just remember that really the key is, can we have a great pollinator health and habitat outcome? When the reason is yes, we're going to find a reason to say yes to working with your utility scale solar project. So with that, Elsa, I'm handing the baton back over to you, and looking
Great.
forward to a little more of our conversation.
Wonderful, Pete. Well, there's a lot of questions. So, and then we had a stack of questions that we got beforehand as well. So I'm going to start with an easy one for you. And that's kind of to your strengths about designing seed mixes. How do you design the seed mixtures for utility scale projects?
Yeah, great. That's a great question, and a really, really important one. The first thing that I'm going to say it again, it's going to be designed collaboratively. Solar Synergy is not going to function where the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund says, here's the seed mixture, this is what you have to plant to participate. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is that every seed mixture that we design for Solar Synergy is a custom design for that project. Okay, there's going to be a conversation where we're asking lots of questions about what the individual project objectives are for that project that's being enrolled in Solar Synergy, and that will influence what the seed mixture designs look like.
Great. And we did have a few questions kind of on seed mixtures and kind of arid conditions. And then the management practices that would need to be different because you're using a pollinator mix versus if you just left it gravel or put in a monoculture of a sod forming grass.
Yeah. So again, I'm just going to keep reiterating this. Every project is unique and approached with a one-on-one perspective. And there's no question that as we move west or to the southwest, and we move into areas where either there's not regular consistent precipitation or the annual precipitation is a low amount, it becomes much, much more challenging. And that's part of the statement about when we can be assured that we're going to have a good pollinator health and habitat outcome. So certainly more challenging, doesn't mean no, doesn't mean it can't be done, but it is much more challenging in those drier, arid regions of the country.
Great. And Pete, we do have a question about from maybe a beekeeper, I'm not sure. Stephanie's asking, how many hives per acre can your typical seed mixes support? And I think we have that information.
Yeah, so not for this answer, I'm going to set solar aside. Okay, just a Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund seed mixture. And when we go back to the slide that I showed about the research results from the U.S. Geological Survey, one of the things that we have determined is that a Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund seed mixture will support 2.5 hives per year. So that's a pretty significant number. And you know, and on the now coming back to the Solar Synergy program, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into that seed mixture design as it relates to pollinator health and habitat. One of the factors is, how can we have floral resources, pollen and nectar, that are there the entirety of the growing season, from the start of the growing season all the way through to the end of the season, not just like June and July, the stuff that's kind of easy. How do we get stuff for April and May and August and September and those months as well, the entirety of the growing season?
Well, I've got a question, and they're both similar in nature. The first question is, how long before construction kickoff do you recommend starting the program? At what point is it too late to implement it? That's not all, Pete. You know my multi-question approach. And can you work with existing facilities? Can the
Yeah.
approach be applied to existing facilities?
Well, you again put 10 pounds in a 5-pound sack with that question.
It's all about development.
Here you go. I'm going to give multiple answers because you asked multiple questions. And the first answer that I'm going to give is, don't take this as it has to be this way, but I think without question, a project will function and move forward best if it is considering enrollment in solar synergy before the EPC is selected. And for folks that are on the webinar that are like, EPC, what does that mean? I'll just generically say, before you've hired the company that's going to build your utility scale solar project. And the reason that I think that works best is then the EPC can factor that into their bid. You know, here's the seed mixtures, here's how they're going to be provided, and that sort of thing. It helps bring everybody together, because it's not uncommon that projects, sometimes once they get through the permitting process, they're sold to somebody else, and then they're built, and then they're sold to another entity, or an end user of the power takes over. We have to have a system where kind of all of those different hats are involved and agree to participate in solar synergy, again, so we can ensure that great pollinator health and habitat outcome. So can a project be retrofitted that's already established? The technical answer is yes, but it would be very, very difficult. So not a great fit, not saying no, but not a great fit to be able to do that. So the best case scenario is pre-EPC selection. Having said that, some of our 24 projects that we've already moved forward and approved for enrollment are already past that stage, and we've worked through those questions and those hurdles, and we're moving forward.
There's an interesting question, Pete, that I see here from Sarah, and this goes back to your seed mix development. Would you consider using all native species in the seed mix for the array under the panels for projects with higher panel heights?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. And the easy answer, the short answer is yes, absolutely. The much longer answer is the industry standard, been working with it for a while, really seems to be moving to 20 to 24 inches. And solar synergy was really designed thinking about those projects in mind. If a utility scale solar project has a lower panel height of 36 inches, 48 inches, as a person that designs seed mixtures, and I get to roll up my sleeves and go to work on a project and design the seed mixture, when it's 36-inch lower panel height or 48 inches, you have all kinds of tools in front of you, all kinds of options, and you can do that. When it's a 20 to 24-inch lower panel height, I open my toolbox, and sometimes all I see is a rusty screwdriver and a roll of duct tape. It's challenging. It can be done, but it's very, very challenging, and using solely native plants and not being able to include things like clovers and that sort of thing can become very, very expensive and lower our level of confidence about how that seed mixture is going to perform. So once again, every project is an individual, and the conversations and the directions that solar synergy will take with the seed mixture are unique to that project. So good question, long answer. The short answer is yes.
Yes. The answer is almost always yes with you, Pete. That's good. Claire asks about the maintenance cost differences between conventional and pollinator-friendly solar. Are there cost savings for the maintenance? And then how would the maintenance change through that vegetative management plan? What would a change be versus if you did a monoculture, or obviously if you had gravel, you wouldn't have a maintenance, but you'd also have no benefit to wildlife or any pollinators.
Yeah, so another great question. And again, really an individual one. Here's I'm going to give a multi-part answer. Again, here's my first answer. We don't really have utility scale solar projects that have been designed thinking about pollinator habitat that are 8 years, 10 years, 12 years old. Okay. So we're confident that we can design seed mixtures for projects that will function, that will reduce future O&M costs, operation and maintenance. What does it cost? If a project can be designed in a manner such that it doesn't have to be mowed every 10 to 14 days or however long throughout the growing season, that has the opportunity to be a cost savings. Now, having said that, we know that there's nothing that we can do where we plant it and think about pollinator benefits, plant it, walk away from it, and always have great results. That's not the way Mother Nature works. We have to be performing management. And as people that design vegetation management plans and work on projects like this, I'm personally always hesitant to say, okay, in year 5, you're going to do this. In year 7, you're going to do this. In year 8, you're going to do this, because we want to see what's happening on that site at that time and make our management recommendations based on that. So if you think back to the things that I listed for a vegetation management plan, it said, what's the plan for year 1, year 2, and then year 3 plus? We didn't go beyond that because we think that that needs to be decided based on what's happening. But we can give recommendations for year 1 and year 2. And when a project is going on to former agricultural production land, in lots of the country, that means corn and soybeans, you will 100% have a weed control problem in year 1 and maybe into year 2. So that's a critically important aspect of establishing that final vegetative cover.
All right, I have one native plant question, and it's a two-parter again, Pete. It's about the seed mixture and it being annual plants or perennials. Do you need to reseed it? And then another question was about natives, and are they native or are they a mixture of natives and non-natives?
Yeah, okay.
So
I think I can
kind of highlight the 2 seed mixtures a little bit. That'll probably cover it.
So I'm going to mostly talk about the buffer mix, the mixture that the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund is bringing to this project free of charge or significantly reduced depending on how many acres. That mixture is 100% native, a minimum of 40 species, more likely 60 to 70 wildflower species in it. And not only that, but these are species that are geographically adapted to that project site and the soil type. And in there, we will have a seed mixture when we have 60, 70 species that contains annuals, biennials, and perennials. Okay. And when we have that much diversity in there, Elsa, as you know, whether it's a hot year or a cold year, a wet year or a dry year, something in that mixture, when we have that much diversity, is going to perform well. That's one of the reasons why we put so much diversity in there and establish that on there. And then I think there was a question about management. If you go back to some of our slides that we had here, I'm going to try and go back because I think one of them wasn't very far away. When we go back to something like this, and we're identifying the areas in green of where we have the buffer mix. We're trying to find areas on the project where we have chunks that are large enough, usually like an acre or larger, that they can actually be managed differently than the array mixture over what could be a 30-year lease agreement on that project, because they will need management on there.
All right, Pete, I've got it. Oh, it disappeared, but I think I got the gist of it. Anthony was asking about our pollinators that are using these sites, with the question related to, are we looking at the pollinator use, who are using the sites, and how are they there throughout the year? Are they there throughout the season? That goes back to seed mixture, I think. And not just this research, but maybe speak to that Minnesota research a little bit about the bees there.
Yeah, sure.
would.
So I'll give a couple of these are generalizations. Every pollinator species can be a little bit different, but honeybees are known to travel up to 2.5 miles from the hive to forage. The closer you have forage to the hive, the less distance they have to travel, the more honey they can produce, and all of that kind of good stuff. Native bees, native pollinators in general, travel very short distances. Could be like just a couple 100 yards to forage. They really have to have all of their pollinator health and habitat needs in a very, very small area. So that's why we try to produce really diverse habitat, and we try to spread it out across that entire utility scale solar project. For native bees, here's kind of an FYI for folks. 70% of native bee species nest in the ground, and it is one bee per chamber. They're not like honeybees where you have thousands of bees working in a communal structure within the hive. That's not how most native pollinators function. And Elsa teed me up on this in not this research study that's on the screen, but on a different one that we're doing with the University of Minnesota. When on the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund habitat seed mixtures, they have identified 3 new native bee records for the state of Minnesota on our NextGen Habitat projects. So for somebody out there that's listening to this right now and they're like, a native bee record, what does that mean? That means 3 species that have never before been identified and found in the state of Minnesota have been identified and found on Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund seed mixture plantings. That is a great example of the if you build it, they will come strategy and kind of fact that's out there. So we're really excited about what next gen habitat projects are like and how they function. And again, it's all about that pollinator habitat and health outcome. And as long as we can be confident that we're going to have a good result, we're going to find a reason to say yes.
Great, Pete. I think we're getting awful close to when we wanted to wrap up. It's about 10:45
One more
now.
One more, Elsa. One
okay,
more.
one more. All right. Well, Claire asked a question about pollinator-friendly solar and whether it helps to ease siting or permitting challenges. So what does the community maybe think about this, or what does the permitting think about pollinator-friendly, and maybe even the pollinator scorecard, if you could go over just a tiny bit how you've been involved in helping develop those for many states.
Yep. So I know that on this call, this webinar, we have lots of people that work in the solar industry. So I'm going to pose a question. We don't have the opportunity for people to raise their hand, yes or no or whatever, but I'm going to pose a question. When you think about the permitting process that you've gone throughout the country and the questions that you're asked, potentially the resistance that you get and that sort of thing, and then you think about your corporate sustainability program, think about enrolling a project in Solar Synergy. And when we're 2 years, 3 years down the line, and you're working on project B, a different utility scale solar project, think about the opportunity of going to that permitting hearing and saying, one, we're working with 2 respected nonprofit pollinator groups, the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund and Monarch Joint Venture. And 2, here are the carbon sequestration, soil health benefits that we've gotten from this project, Project A. Here's the pollinator benefits, and here's the kind of sustainability platform that we have that we're bringing not only to that project, but that we want to bring to this project. Seems to me that that could be a really cool message that you would have in your pocket during that permitting process. We haven't done it yet, but I have no doubt that that would be impactful to be able to tell that entity that is looking at and approving your potential permit about those benefits and the things that you're doing. I think that could be very, very exciting.
All right, that was the last one, Pete.
All right.
Or we'll
Thank
go
you,
over our time if we get going.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for being on here. If this is going to be recorded, you will receive, everybody that registered, whether you were on today or not, will receive a follow-up with a link to the recording. We would ask that you share this with your colleagues. Think about it. Please go to our website, check out that QR code that is on here, and hit us up with some questions. We would love to have a conversation with you and follow up with a more distinct conversation following this webinar. So thank you, everybody, and thank you, Elsa.